Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created purely for entertainment. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is entirely coincidental. Viewer discretion is advised. I've always believed that the closest threats are the ones you least expect. That evening started out as ordinary as any other. The clinking of cutlery, the gentle hum of conversation, and the warm scent of roasted chicken filling the house made everything feel safe and familiar. My husband, Daniel, had invited his friend Mark over for dinner. It wasn't the first time, and honestly, I liked Mark. He was always polite, full of funny stories, and he seemed genuinely fond of our little family. But sometimes, life only needs a single moment to turn everything upside down. The dinner stretched into the night longer than I'd planned. Daniel and Mark were talking sports and laughing over glasses of red wine, while I cleared the plates, half listening to the low rumble of their conversation from the living room. The rain had started outside, tapping softly on the windows like it was trying to sneak inside. I remember thinking how cozy it all felt, and how grateful I was for the warmth of my home. But there was a strange feeling in my chest too, a flutter I couldn't quite explain. As if I knew deep down that this night would end differently. After I'd finished cleaning up, I joined them on the couch. Mark was relaxed, his long legs stretched out, his smile easy. But his eyes, there was something restless there, something I'd never noticed before. Daniel seemed oblivious, launching into another story about their college days. Mark laughed at all the right places, but his glances toward me were becoming more frequent, almost searching. I tried to shake it off, blaming the wine or maybe my own overactive imagination. By the time the clock showed 11:30, Daniel stood up, rubbing his eyes and announcing he was calling it a night. He offered to drive Mark home, but Mark waved him off, saying he'd booked a ride and would wait for it to arrive. Daniel kissed me goodnight and trudged upstairs, leaving Mark and me alone in the living room. The sound of Daniel's footsteps fading above us felt strangely loud in the silence that followed. Mark shifted on the couch, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. For a moment, he didn't say anything. The rain had grown heavier, drumming steadily on the roof. I started to ask if he wanted coffee, just to fill the silence, but he interrupted me with a soft laugh, almost nervous. "You know, I've always wondered something about you, Emma," he said, using my name in a tone that sent a shiver down my spine. I forced a smile. "What's that?" He took a deep breath, his eyes locked on mine, intense and unblinking. "If you're really as happy as you pretend to be." My stomach twisted. The room suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in on me. I tried to laugh it off, to keep things light, but my voice came out thinner than I intended. "Of course I am. Why would you say that?" Mark tilted his head, studying me like he was trying to read my thoughts. "I've known Daniel for a long time. I've seen the way he changes around other people. And I've seen the way you look sometimes when you think nobody's watching. You're not fooling me, Emma." My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it. I opened my mouth to reply, but no words came out. I didn't know how to explain that he was wrong, or maybe that he wasn't. A part of me was furious. Who was he to question my marriage? But another part of me was trembling, because in a corner of my mind, his words echoed too close to truths I didn't want to admit. Mark leaned closer, his voice dropping lower. "I think you deserve better than this. I think you deserve to be happy for real. And I also think there's something Daniel hasn't told you." A chill swept over me, goosebumps rising on my arms. The air seemed heavier, filled with the scent of rain and the electric crackle of secrets on the verge of spilling out. I swallowed hard. "What are you talking about, Mark?" He hesitated, glancing at the darkened stairs as though checking to make sure Daniel wasn't coming back. Then he looked at me, eyes blazing with something like urgency. "I shouldn't be the one to tell you this, but you need to know. It's about Daniel, and something he's been hiding from you for years." My breath caught in my throat. I felt like the floor had shifted under my feet. My mind raced through every possibility, an affair, money problems, a hidden past, but nothing seemed to fit. I wanted to demand answers, to shake the truth out of him, but all I could do was stare at him in stunned silence. And just as I opened my mouth to speak, Mark's phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at the screen, his expression turning guarded again. "That's my ride," he murmured, standing up quickly. "I'll talk to you soon. Just think about what I said." Before I could say another word, he grabbed his coat and disappeared into the rain, leaving me standing there, shaking, with my heart crashing in my chest. And all I could think was, what on earth was Mark talking about, and why did I suddenly feel like my entire marriage was built on secrets? Of course. Here's the next 700 words continuing your story from where the introduction left off, following all your instructions. The door clicked shut behind Mark, and the silence he left behind felt so deep it buzzed in my ears. For a few seconds, I just stood there, staring at the rain dripping down the window, my mind trying to process what had just happened. My husband's friend had basically suggested my marriage was a lie, and then walked out into the night like it was nothing. I couldn't even begin to guess what secrets he was hinting at. I wanted to run after him and demand the truth, but my legs felt frozen, and my throat was tight, like I'd swallowed a stone. Slowly, I turned off the lamp in the living room and tiptoed upstairs. I pushed open the bedroom door and found Daniel already asleep, breathing softly, one arm flung over his side of the bed. For a moment, I just watched him, studying the lines of his face in the glow from the hallway. He looked so peaceful, so normal, like the man I'd married 8 years ago. But now a voice in my head whispered that maybe I didn't know him at all. I lay down next to him, but sleep refused to come. My thoughts were tangled in Mark's words. What could Daniel possibly be hiding from me for years? I replayed every conversation, every argument, every moment I'd caught him staring off into space lately. Had I missed signs? Was there someone else? Or was it something completely different, money troubles, secrets from his past? The question spun around my head like a wheel I couldn't stop. When the sun finally rose, I felt like I hadn't slept a minute. I slipped out of bed early and made coffee, staring into the swirling dark liquid like it might give me answers. Daniel wandered into the kitchen a little while later, still in his pajamas, yawning as he kissed my cheek. "Morning, Em," he said, reaching for a mug. "Did Mark get home okay?" I stiffened, the mention of Mark's name making my stomach twist. "Yeah, his ride came." Daniel nodded, pouring himself coffee and adding way too much sugar, just like he always did. "Good. He was in a weird mood last night, huh? Kind of quiet at the end." I forced a casual shrug. "Yeah, maybe he was tired." He didn't push the topic, but I couldn't stop glancing at him, searching for cracks in his calm expression. I kept waiting for him to say something, to confess to some hidden truth, but he just kept talking about work and the possibility of taking a short trip next month. It felt unreal, standing there chatting about vacation plans when my mind was stuck on Mark's ominous words. Later that afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I texted Mark, asking what he'd meant last night. The 3 dots appeared, like he was typing, but then they disappeared again. No reply came. I stared at my phone until my eyes burned. Days passed, and Mark still didn't answer. The silence was driving me insane. Meanwhile, Daniel went on as though everything was perfectly fine. He brought me flowers one evening, cooked dinner another night, even suggested we watch one of our favorite movies together. But each time he smiled at me, I wondered if it was all an act. I started thinking back to little things I'd brushed aside before, like the way Daniel had become protective of his phone, keeping it face down on the table. Or how he sometimes slipped outside to take calls in the yard, his voice low, glancing toward the house as if making sure I couldn't hear. I remembered how a few months ago, he'd come home late from work several nights in a row, saying there were issues at the office. And I recalled how he'd seemed distracted lately, quick to change the subject if conversations got too personal. It wasn't just the big things either. Sometimes he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, a mix of worry and guilt. And now, thanks to Mark, every one of those moments felt like a clue I'd missed. I began searching for answers in other ways. One afternoon while Daniel was in the shower, I unlocked his laptop. He usually left it open, but this time it was password protected. That was new. My hands trembled as I tried every possible password I could think of: my birthday, our wedding date, his usual work logins, but none of them worked. I shut the laptop quickly when I heard the water turn off, my heart thudding so hard I felt dizzy. That evening, as we sat on the couch, Daniel reached over and squeezed my hand. "You've been quiet lately. Is something wrong?" I almost blurted it all out right then, that Mark had said things that made me question everything, that I was scared he was hiding something from me. But I couldn't. The fear of what I might hear back from him was too big, too sharp. Instead, I just forced a small smile. "I'm fine. Just tired." But inside, I was anything but fine. My mind was spinning with suspicions, possibilities, and the memory of Mark's intense gaze. And even as I tried to act normal, one thought kept repeating in my head: if Daniel really was hiding something, how far would he go to keep it secret? Of course. Here's the next 650 words continuing your story from where it left off, following all your instructions. The days that followed were the strangest mix of normal and completely abnormal. Daniel kept up his usual routines, going to work, texting me sweet messages, planning our weekends. But for me, every word, every gesture, felt like it might be hiding something else. I felt like I was living two lives, one where I smiled and went through the motions, and another where my mind spun in circles trying to piece together what Mark had meant. One afternoon, I decided I couldn't take waiting around anymore. I called Mark's number instead of texting. It rang twice and then went straight to voicemail. His message sounded cheerful, but I couldn't miss the tension underneath. I hung up without leaving a message, feeling like the walls were closing in. If he was going to drop that kind of bombshell on me, why vanish afterward? That evening, I was folding laundry when Daniel's phone, left unattended on the coffee table, lit up with a message preview. The name flashing on the screen made my breath catch: Mark. All it said was, "Can we talk? It's urgent." My fingers itched to pick up the phone, but before I could even move, Daniel came around the corner and scooped it up. He glanced at the screen, his face tightening for just a second before he tucked the phone into his pocket. "Who is that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Just work stuff," he said too quickly, forcing a smile. "I'll deal with it later." I stared at him, my pulse thudding in my ears. Mark wasn't work stuff. Whatever this was, it was personal, and Daniel was trying to hide it. That night, as I lay in bed pretending to be asleep, Daniel slipped quietly out of the room. I waited until I heard the faint murmur of his voice downstairs. I crept to the top of the stairs and strained to hear, but he was speaking so low I could only catch fragments: my name, and something about, "She can't know." A jolt of ice shot through my veins. I rushed back to bed before he caught me listening, my thoughts racing in 100 different directions. The next morning, I couldn't stop replaying those words in my head. She can't know. Know what? I started to wonder if Mark and Daniel were somehow in on something together. The idea made me feel sick. I thought about every time the two of them had exchanged looks over dinner or shared private jokes I didn't understand. Maybe there were secrets between them that went back years, secrets that somehow involved me. Meanwhile, another part of me started worrying there could be something darker going on, maybe something illegal, or financial trouble, or even blackmail. I remembered how, a few months ago, Daniel had suddenly pulled out of buying a new car, saying he'd rather save money. At the time, I'd thought he was being sensible, but now I wondered if it was because he couldn't afford it. My anxiety grew worse when I ran into Sophie, one of my close friends, at the grocery store. She took one look at me and frowned. "Emma, are you okay? You look exhausted." I tried to brush it off, but the words tumbled out before I could stop them. "Sophie, did Mark ever say anything weird to you about Daniel?" Her eyes widened. "No." "Why?" I hesitated, not wanting to tell her everything, but needing to say something. "He said there's something Daniel hasn't told me." "Something big." Sophie lowered her voice. "Emma, you don't think Daniel's cheating, do you?" The thought had been scratching at the edges of my mind, but hearing it spoken out loud made my chest tighten. "I don't know. I don't think so. But something's going on." Sophie reached out and squeezed my arm. "Listen, if you need me, call me. And be careful. Secrets have a way of blowing up." Her words echoed in my mind all the way home. That night, while Daniel showered, I checked his jacket pockets, desperate for any clue. I found nothing but a crumpled gas receipt and a mint wrapper. I felt like I was losing my mind, seeing shadows in every corner. But the thing was, I could feel the truth getting closer, like a storm gathering on the horizon. And as much as part of me wanted to stop digging, another part couldn't let it go. Because now, it wasn't just about Mark's warning. It was about Daniel's strange behavior, the secrets whispered late at night, and the sense that my entire life was perched on the edge of something I couldn't yet see. Of course. Here's the next 450 words continuing your story, leading up toward the climax as requested. The next few days felt like living underwater, each moment heavy and muffled, as though I were waiting for something to burst. I barely slept, jolting awake at every creak of the house. Daniel noticed, asking me again and again if I was okay, but I kept brushing him off with half smiles and excuses about being tired from work. Inside, though, I was barely holding it together. Late one evening, I was sitting in the living room, pretending to scroll through my phone while Daniel washed up the dishes. His phone buzzed on the coffee table beside me. This time, curiosity won. I snatched it up, my heart slamming in my chest. The message on the screen was from Mark again. Emma deserves the truth. I can't keep this secret for you anymore. My breath caught in my throat. I heard the water shut off in the kitchen, so I quickly dropped the phone back onto the table and tried to look normal. Daniel came back into the room, drying his hands, and sat next to me. He wrapped an arm around me, but I felt stiff as a board beneath his touch. Are we okay?" he asked softly, his eyes searching my face. The words were right there on the tip of my tongue. I wanted to scream at him, to ask him what secret was so big that his best friend was ready to betray him over it. But the fear of his answer kept me silent. Instead, I whispered, "I don't know." "Are we?" He blinked, surprised, and opened his mouth to say something, but his phone buzzed again. He snatched it up this time, turned away from me, and started typing rapidly. That was all the confirmation I needed. Something huge was happening, and Daniel was working hard to keep it from me. The next day, I decided to go see Mark in person. He wasn't answering calls or texts, but I remembered where his office was downtown. I told Daniel I was going shopping, then drove straight there, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I found Mark pacing outside the building, his phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, he ended the call quickly, his face pale. "Emma, you shouldn't be here," he said, glancing around like he expected someone to be watching. "Mark, I need to know. What is it Daniel's hiding from me?" He hesitated, swallowing hard. "It's not safe, Emma. For either of us. But you deserve the truth." The way he said it made my skin crawl. My voice trembled as I demanded, "Then tell me. Tell me right now." Mark looked over my shoulder, eyes widening in alarm. "Oh God. He's here." I turned to see Daniel's car pulling up to the curb, his face dark and unreadable behind the windshield. My heart crashed inside my chest as the world seemed to tilt around me. Of course. Here's your next 330 words continuing the story with an escalating twist and maintaining suspense, as requested. Daniel's car screeched to a stop at the curb, and for a split second, the three of us just stared at each other. The rain began to fall again, as if even the sky sensed something was about to explode. Daniel stepped out, his jaw clenched so tight the veins in his neck stood out. He slammed the door and stalked toward us, his eyes locked on Mark. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Mark?" Daniel's voice was low but vibrating with anger. Mark stood his ground, though I could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. "She has a right to know, Daniel. You can't keep lying to her. Not about this." I spun to Daniel, shaking. "Lying about what? Tell me." But Daniel ignored me completely, grabbing Mark by the arm and yanking him a few feet away. They spoke in harsh whispers I couldn't catch, their bodies angled toward each other like two fighters squaring off. I stepped closer, desperate to hear, when suddenly Mark shouted, "She's in danger, Daniel. You know it." I froze, the words echoing in my head. In danger? What did that even mean? Daniel spun toward me, his face pale. "Emma, get in the car. Now." "No," I cried, backing away. "I'm not going anywhere until someone tells me what's going on." Mark reached out and grabbed my hand. "Emma, listen to me. It's not just about Daniel. Someone's been watching you." I didn't want to believe it, but it's true. You've been followed for weeks. And Daniel knows why. The rain was pouring down now, soaking us all. My pulse roared in my ears as Daniel shouted, "Shut up, Mark." But Mark wouldn't stop. He looked at me, eyes wild. "Emma, it's about who Daniel really is and the people he used to work for." I staggered back, my mind reeling. Used to work for? The words crashed over me like thunder. Everything I thought I knew about my husband felt like it was dissolving into mist. Absolutely. Here's the next 300 words, bringing your story to its climax with resolution and a final twist, following your instructions. Daniel ran a hand through his wet hair, rain streaming down his face. His eyes darted between me and Mark, as though deciding whether to keep fighting or finally surrender the truth. His shoulders slumped as he whispered, "Emma, I didn't want you to ever know. Before we met, I worked undercover for a federal agency. I infiltrated a powerful crime syndicate. They're the ones following you. They've finally figured out who I really am." I felt my breath leave my lungs in one sharp rush. Crime syndicate? Daniel, why didn't you tell me? Because they said if I ever talked, they'd come after you. I thought I'd kept us safe. But Mark found out, and they're watching him too. Mark stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Emma, he's been trying to leave that life behind for years. But a few months ago, they started making threats again. They want revenge. And they know your name." A bolt of lightning lit the sky, casting Daniel's face in stark relief. "Emma, we have to disappear. Both of us. I've been arranging new identities, new passports. That's why I've been acting strange. I was trying to protect you." My mind spun with images of our cozy life, shattered now by secrets and danger. So our whole marriage was built on a lie? Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "No. Loving you is the only real thing I've ever done." Before I could answer, Mark's phone rang, shrill and insistent. He glanced at the screen and went pale. "It's them. They know you're here, Emma." And then, in a final twist that ripped the ground out from under me, Mark whispered, "I'm sorry, Emma. I never told you. I used to work for them too." I stared at him, my world crumbling all over again as the rain kept pouring down around us. "Of course. Here's your final 260 words, wrapping up the story naturally and resolving key threads as requested." My entire body felt numb as Mark's confession hung in the air. The rain beat down harder, drowning out the sounds of the city around us. I stared at him, struggling to find my voice. "Mark, you were part of them?" He nodded, eyes full of guilt. "Years ago. But I left, like Daniel tried to. I thought I could help protect you both from the inside. That's why I stayed close. But they found me out. And now they're coming." Daniel stepped between us, his voice trembling. "We don't have time for this. Emma, we have to go. Right now." I felt torn in half. Part of me wanted to run as far as I could. Another part wanted to stand there and demand more answers. But deep down, I knew the choice was already made. I took Daniel's hand. "Okay, let's go." Mark grabbed my other arm. "I can help get you safe. I have contacts. You'll need more than fake passports, Daniel. They won't stop until they find her." Daniel stared at him, eyes hard, but finally gave a small nod. "All right. We work together. One last time." Within minutes, we were in Daniel's car, speeding out of the city lights, Mark following behind us. As the skyline faded in the rearview mirror, I glanced at my husband. His secrets had shattered my world, but one thing felt true: he loved me enough to risk everything. And as the rain eased into a quiet drizzle, I realized that even though my life would never be the same, I was ready to fight for it. Because love, no matter how hidden under secrets, was worth the risk, and the truth, however painful, was always better than living a lie. E1